here with Lee Brownell. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you.
So Lee and I have known each other for a while. We've worked on projects together. He's been an investor with some of our projects. We've traded ideas on investment strategies and whatnot over time. And the reason I brought Lee on is because of his experience with some new construction projects and kind of some interesting structuring as in cycling through deals where it's multiple lots in a residential development. But Lee, you were a physical therapist, and I understand that you've done some work with some professional athletes over time. And do you mind just sharing just a little bit about your background?
Sure. I actually was drafted to play baseball out of high school and didn't sign, and ended up going to college and getting a PT degree. Opened up my practice when I first got out of school, a private practice in sports medicine, which back in the late 70s, early 80s was not too many around. So the only big one was going on was the one in LA with Curlin and Job. So we were kind of on the forefront, and I started scrubbing in surgery. We were the first guys in town here that were doing arthroscopic surgery. So we had a lot of the players from the Valley come in just so we would do the surgery on them, and then I would do the rehab on them. So yeah, we've and then I was in Korea for a while. The Samsung Lions hired me to work with them and teach their trainers what to do. So I traveled, internationally for a little while, and it's been fun, 35 years, but I was starting to look at what am I going to do next? A very wise person once told me to retire young and often.
Yeah.
I forgot about the often part, but
that's good.
For the last few years, I got out of medicine, and I've been doing private lending and expanding my horizons in that area.
Yeah.
There's a ton to learn. So every little piece of the puzzle you dig into, you get a little bit wiser.
Yeah, isn't that true? It's always constantly a learning arena, we'll call it. So
I agree.
And the projects you're working on, some different projects. What is your geographically area of focus? And then maybe, I know that over time you've sort of shifted a little bit in your focus on the type of investments as well.
Right. Yeah, that seems to change daily, but no, I'm in Central California. So I do the Central Valley and also the Central Coast because I'm from the Central Coast. So I actually have a strong team. It's about 170 miles from me, but all my friends and the people that I'm stronger over there than I am where I live. So most of my deals are over there, and I have family there, so it's not it's a little farther than where you should be lending, a little bit closer to home, but that is home to me still. So I do well over there.
You've got good boots on the ground, so to speak.
I do have lots of boots too, lots of eyes.
Good.
Real important. I feel more comfortable over there than I do here.
Nice. Very cool. And so when you started in the private, you started sort of as a passive investor, had cash, you were ready to invest. You started teaming up with some other investors where you come up with projects and work together. What were maybe a few of your first investments? What were your experiences initially?
Well, as a money partner, it's just putting money into deals. Basically, somebody else had done the work, and so I did some due diligence on the projects and got into some of those deals. But I knew that I wanted to do my own deals, so I spent a little bit more time funding my own, taking my own money to do some of those deals. I wasn't comfortable using other people's money on those deals, so I did my own money. And then as I grew in my knowledge base, I guess, as far as leveraging, it's better to make money off somebody else's money. So now I've shifted to using my money as reserves and as emergency funds, doing some bridge loans, doing some quick hitters, with my own money, so it's easy. So
you're acting sort of as a facilitator, the architect of the deal,
correct,
call the deal sponsor, whatever you want to call it, where you're really, or what's the other term? I'm not going to think of it. It's a very common term. Anyway, you act as you hold everything together.
Yeah. So the borrowers come to me. I look at the deal. I structure the deal the way that makes sense for me and my investors. So it makes sense for everybody. And I turn down probably 9 out of 10 that come to me.
Yeah.
Because they're not there's no juice in the orange by the time everybody gets paid, and we're not going to do it for free, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is if the borrower's not going to make enough money, I don't want to do the deal with them at all, because that's too easy for them to walk away.
Yeah, no motivation.
And there, even though you think that, boy, I don't want to let this deal go, another one will be on your doorstep.
Absolutely,
right
yeah.
away.
Some of the best deals that you've done are the ones you didn't do, almost, right?
Yeah, true.
Syndicator was the word I was trying to.
Yeah.
So being the syndicator of the deal. But yeah, to that point, I totally agree with you about deals to get into projects that are too skinny, or where there are risks that you can't identify, or just issues that you can't see. Much better off staying away from them than getting into something where it's just not clear what's happening. So,
well, the deal that we discussed, or I think we want to discuss it, that's exactly the issue, is the unseen or the unforeseen problems that could arise. And this deal revolved around some contaminated lots. There were 6 lots that were contaminated a long time ago.
Yeah, maybe could you just maybe start out with how you found the property and, and what your thought process was through each stage, so that our listeners are able to kind of take a ride along and understand where you were coming from, why you made certain decisions.
Okay, my team in the Central Coast contacted me many months ago, probably 6-8 months ago now, about some lots that were in my realtor. Interesting story about my realtor. I actually was in a triathlon with him, and he had a heart attack.
Oh. And
so I gave him CPR and saved his life, I think. And I'm not sure why now, because and it's always a little factor when we go. I go down and swim with them, and we train a little bit together. So anyway, he called me with a pocket listing of 6 lots that were going to be on the market. He knew about them. And we have a contractor down there, so we were real excited about trying to get these lots, and they had been remediated. So I didn't really want to jump into something that would get my investors, on the hook later down the road if something came back and these lots weren't clean.
Yeah, can you describe what your definition of remediated is?
Well, the lots were contaminated with an oil spill. So in my not knowing how you fix that, I mean, there are many ways to fix it. You can take the dirt away, you can bring new dirt in, you can take the dirt away and they can burn it, and then they can bring the same dirt back. What they did on these was to actually scrape the topsoil off, but they actually remediated them. Was called phytoremediation, and they actually made a park out of it. And they grew, there's about 4 or 5 plants. Grass is a very good one. And they made this park for a long time. I think the remediation time was 7 years, but I think the project was probably a park for 20 years. So they scraped the houses. They took everything away. They did the phytoremediation, and now the oil company was ready to sell the lots off.
I see.
So we had inside track on them. We were trying to put things together. And I needed to do a lot of homework to figure out, how do I make sure that we're not on the hook for these lots 6 months from now when the oil starts popping back up in somebody's backyard.
Right.
So that took and dealing with the county and writing letters. I mean, I even talked to a remediation company that's in Canada. I mean, I had a phone call with them trying to say, what do I need? What do I need to make sure I'm okay? And nobody will give it to you.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants to keep you on the hook. So I was a little leery about it, and it took me a while, and we finally got things straightened out where we were comfortable with the deal. Now, my investors, remind you, this is their first investment.
Yeah. Just one thing on the remediation. and maybe you were going to get there with this, and that is the final sign off. Is there a certain final sign off? I've done some remediation, some projects. I did a gas station where I built a strip mall after we did a complete remediation of a lot that had a gas station in it. I know my brother had a grocery store where part of the land had a landfill that needed to be remediated. So there were certain processes that we went through. Is that part of what you ended up doing, or did you not get that far with this one?
I didn't get that far with it, but what happened was there were another 6 lots in the same housing development. Actually, the housing development one street over. Mm-hmm. It's a different development, but it's like right next door. Sure. And they had already been remediated, and they had been sold, and houses had been built on them. Mm-hmm. So, and the banks were okay with what they had done. Same type of remediation. So we had that to fall back on, and we thought, okay, I think we're going to be okay with this. The county of Santa Barbara, which is a pretty tough county to get through, had written a letter stating that they were clean. But we didn't do another phase 1. I don't know if the phase 1 was in the paperwork that I never got, but my guess is it was. Mm-hmm. So because the realtors, which I didn't really rely on them, but mm-hmm. the county of Santa Barbara said they were clean, mm-hmm. which if Santa Barbara says it, you probably.
Yeah. And that typically goes on the deed or the abstract, depending on what type of recording it is, but that it typically ties along with the property so that it's then known from that point on that it's clean. At least right. That's how it worked in the case I was involved with. But go ahead. What you were saying?
So the remediation issue was huge to me, and everybody kind of was blowing it off as, it's okay, everything's good. We got a house right next door and all that. And there are also actually, the next project we're doing right now is 2 more lots in that same development that had the same issue. So, mm-hmm. I mean, there's just like 12 or 14 lots now that have been remediated in this. There were 2 different oil pumps, oil mm-hmm. wells, and each one of them they had issues with. So,
I see. Okay.
So anyway, I think with the history of what's going on that we're going to be okay with it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned phase 1, and so maybe we should just briefly describe phase 1 and phase 2. What we're referring to is the phase 1 environmental study. Can you just describe your
Well, the phase 1 is just where they go and they do pop holes in the dirt and they look for contaminants, and it's what is it, $5,000 or something like that mm-hmm. to do that, and then. And if you pass phase 1, then you don't have to go to phase 2. Phase 2 is much more involved mm-hmm. and probably, 6 months in term. I mean, it could be longer, mm-hmm. but it's a much bigger deal if they find some contaminants. But the issue is if you own that property, you own that issue.
Yeah.
So you don't want to buy that property until you know that issue is clear.
Yeah. 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 They, in my experience, they also do the historical, the sort of background check on the property to find out what the uses were in the past. And so that's part of the phase 1.
The thing about this is there's 200 other homes right there. I mean, it's right in the middle of a 200 home development. Sure. So, I mean, mm-hmm. the guy that is next door to the last house they scraped, I mean, he's got to be looking in his backyard going, like, if it was like 40 feet over there, why isn't it in my backyard?
Yeah.
But his phase 1 came back clean. So they said, mm-hmm. okay, we're not going to do it.
Good.
So the oil company actually bought the houses back from the people. I have all the paperwork, what they paid for them. They bought them back, and then they took a bulldozer and scraped them all off and said, all right, here. It was a pretty expensive deal for the.
How many years ago was that? Just curious.
I think it was 19. But the remediation time period was 7 years. But it's been apart for 15 years or something.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so you had the 6 lots, and what were the next things that happened?
Well, so what happened then, we were trying to fund the project. So the way we put this together was the first time I put it together, and I actually thought I had it funded, mm-hmm. Was a $2.2 or $2.3 million project. So I went to my broker and said, "Can you help me fund this deal?" And he dug up some of his money. We had it all figured out. We had everybody was happy with the numbers. And when we got to the table, the guys who were actually funding it wanted more.
Okay.
So I walked away from the deal.
And so the 2.3 would have been to purchase 6 lots. And
Right.
it would have been for the construction costs for the 6 homes.
Correct.
That's what it would have taken. And you had a group that was involved, interested, but then it ended up being too expensive where the numbers didn't work out.
Yeah, the numbers worked the way we figured them. Everybody agreed to them over the phone when we sat down at the table to do our final walkthrough with the numbers. All of a sudden, they wanted more, a lot more, and it was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I got up and I just actually walked out of the meeting and said, I'm not doing it. So I went back to the drawing board to restructure it. I went to some of my own OPM, which own investors, which was the first time in, and it's for anybody listening, a $2.2 million deal for a first-time investor is a pretty big chunk to swallow. So we took a long time with them trying to go through all the process and how we're going to do it. And I'll get to this, how we ended up staging it. And so it took a while. So I realized that that's too big of a bite. So I needed to break it into smaller bites. And I really like the format that we came up with. Because I'm using it, I'm using it again. And the one after that is I'm using it again.
Nice.
So what we did is we took one of the investors to purchase the 6 lots, and we already had investors, and then we went to other investors, and we had them invest in each individual project. So there were 6 projects. There were 7 projects. One was the lots, and then there were 7 construction projects. So what I did is I took one person to buy the lots with the understanding that the lots were already sold.
Yeah.
So the turnaround was quick. And so we were selling.
Sold meaning there were people ready to buy them?
Yeah. Yeah, because the same contractor was going to build all the houses.
Yeah.
So, and we had people to fund each unit, let's call it. So we had 6 units. So I had funding for all 6 units. So the investor who bought the land already had all of his 6 lots sold at a $20,000 profit per lot, just like instant equity.
Yep.
So we got the lots because they were remediated. We bought them on the cheap. So
and when you say sold, just to be clear, that would mean that they have buyers ready to buy, but he hasn't received the money yet.
Of the units for each unit?
For the lots. I think he carried back the money for the lots, right?
No, this is a different project.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
No, we talked about another one. No, this we didn't own this dirt. We own the other project. We own the dirt. This one, we don't own the dirt. Okay. So we had to buy the dirt first, and then we had to go out and take and find investors for each of the 6 units. So what we ended up putting together was an investor for unit number 1. Let's say they put $400,000 in, and we were building unit 1, and we were selling. By the time we built and sold unit 1, that investor would have their money back, and they could roll that money into unit 4.
Yep, exactly.
And then we had somebody for unit 2 that rolled into unit 5, and the land investor, because the profits that he made on the sale of unit 1 and unit 2. He was funding the construction of unit 3 and also unit 6.
Yeah.
So by keeping their money into the deal, they doubled up on their yield per unit.
Yeah.
So the returns were I mean, they were 28-30%.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's actually the strategy that I wrote about in my book, the Bang Free Blueprint. So it has that same cycle effect where you do 3 or 4 lots at a time, and then you cycle as one sells, you bring it back.
Well, if I would have read your book, then I wouldn't have had to do all the thinking.
No, it's great. I think it's excellent. It's good.
So we're doing that again. So anyway, so with that project, then we're all ready to go. We put out our what I call circular to our money to invest in the land, And because it was now, we'd already talked to them about the whole project, but now we were cutting it down and bringing in more investors, that it was a smaller bite for them. And they jumped all over it. I mean, the first circular we put out, we raised the money in like a day.
Wow.
So I called the broker that I work with down there, and he said the lots had just sold. So we were like a week late.
Wow. Wow.
So, but we all learned, and then I had to go back and say, sorry guys, but all this work and all this stuff, and I had met with them several times. But it turns around, that was probably a month ago. Turns around, there's 5 more down there that we're doing right now. Same idea. Those lots that were in the same development, we're picking those lots up, and we're just doing one is 2 homes, another one is 2 homes, and then there's a single home. So we have 5 that we're going to build. Same format. I'm going in with the same idea. I like it. I can bring different investors in.
Very nice. Very nice. There, do you mind just sharing a little bit about the other project that you and I talked about briefly? And that was where it really becomes, it could either be done by way of the seller being an equity partner or the seller doing subordinate seller carryback. Subordinate seller carryback just meaning that they take a note that goes behind the construction loan. So
yeah, the other project is much bigger. That's one of the reasons. We actually have a 15-acre project in the same town where these 5 are. That's our next project with this builder. But in Oklahoma, we have 160 units that are paper lots. And so we
by paper lots, you mean they're not completed there?
Yeah, we still have to do the infrastructure on them. But as far as the boundaries and this, they're all set. We
engineering and everything else is done. It's the site work that needs to be completed.
That's right. So we need to start doing site works, about $1 million to put the roads in and do that, the horizontal work. And then we're trying to, this is what Tom and I are talking about, another project, is we're trying to figure out whether we want to bring in a mid-sized builder and do the whole project, or whether we go to individual builders and sell them, or actually do like 10 lots at a time with individual builders, and maybe even look at whether single family homes or multifamily, maybe we could do a mixture of those in there.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out the best use of the land, the development. But we own the dirt because my partner he's the one that wants to sell this. So
nice.
So what we're trying to do is to bring the builders in and not charge them for the dirt until the property or the asset is sold. And then a piece of that profit goes to the dirt owner. And then we get our profit on top of that. So it's a good deal for the builder because he doesn't have to come up with a couple $1 million to buy all the land and then start his project. So what we're doing, I say we're doing this, we can change our mind at any time. So is that we are bringing the dirt to the game. So as Tom's talking about, that's the equity in the deal. And then we are also going to loan the money to the contractors to build. So we will make, there's several streams of income from that. We'll have a stream of income from the dirt. We'll have a stream of income from the loan. And we're still trying to decide about the sales part of it. I don't think I want to get into selling them.
Yeah. And what's nice about that structure is you have the security land all the way through.
Right. We control it.
Right. You control all the land. You also have the control of all of the construction funds during the time that anything is happening or not happening on that project. Nobody gets paid for anything on the construction until the work is done, and it gets cycled through. So you're able to keep it really good and a very kind of a secure position by having that as collateral and the reserve accounts.
And I think the same format that we talked about with these 6 houses will work with 160 houses because we take $10 million and we just keep rolling that 10 million into the next phase of the projects. So the same money just keeps making money.
Nice.
So the returns would be fantastic. The yields would be great. I mean, everybody that if they invest, if you go house by house, they make X number of dollars per house. And the more houses you can fund, each individual wants to do 5 homes, and he funds 5 homes.
Yep.
And just keep rolling it.
And what's beneficial for the builder as well is that, let's say that things start slowing up and the economy isn't, and the sales aren't happening as fast. You can throttle that production back as well, rather than a builder going out and building 30 homes and getting caught with 20 of them because of market crashes or something.
Right.
It allows for it to follow the markets, be a lot tighter, and not get hung out on the skinny branches.
Yeah, we don't want them to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are tight with the lending,
Mm-hmm.
we can control that. And I don't want the guy to have to pay on financing that he can't use or can't sell. So I'd rather put it back with my investors and say, just sit on this because we're going to slow this project down, and everybody's still happy versus trying to chase a guy who's going to leave the country because he owes several $1 million.
Well, and that's a really good point, because the tendency that I've seen with some developers or borrowers is that they think of the idea of going to the bank gives them the money, and then they go do what they have to do. But if like you're doing and like we do with our fund, we make sure we keep really good, tight controls over everything. And as long as everybody's performing as they should be, everything runs completely smooth. And we've had developers that have been very thankful for the fact that we've been able to keep those controls in place, because it doesn't allow them to get off track and get distracted by other projects. It really keeps the focus on what's going on. So.
Yeah, I muted myself. My fax machine's going off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. One thing that we found too, just a little side note here, and that is, and I don't know if you've done this, but we've been involved with several different developments. We're involved with 2 of them right now where they're over 200 lots each. And what happens in the bigger developments like that is that there can be like 2 different range of home values being built, right? So maybe in one area it's moderate homes, in the next area it's one step up from that. What we've found and to be a good strategy, and that is to work with 2 builders, because if you can get 2 builders sort of working side by side, or at least working in that same neighborhood, there's a tendency for them to be a little more competitive, right? And so they work faster, because if they're being compared to the other crew, which I never had really thought of it that way, but I mean, it can be the case.
So the question I have is 2 the right number, or is 4 the right number?
Right. Yeah. My take on it would be 3 would be the max, and that's if there are 2 different classes of homes. Let's say all the homes are the same classification, and let's say it's over 100 lots, 100 or over. I think there's room for 2 easily.
Right.
The third one, I would say, from my experience, would be if there is a second classification or a second size of structure, that like a different market that's being focused on for the properties. So,
is there, in your experience, is there an issue with having single family homes mixed with some, say, fourplexes, or can we push those off to the side? Because now you're in rentals versus home ownership, which is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's 2 things. One is that would be partly an element of zoning, what's allowed from a zoning perspective, and the other thing would be how it fits into the neighborhood in general. When I've done quite a few different developments, and most of the developments that we did, we had covenants on those developments, so that there would be so that the neighborhood. So when the first people buy, they know pretty much what everybody in the neighborhood is going to do, because they're somewhat restricted. Maybe the home can't be smaller than a certain size, or maybe the pitch of the roof has to be 512 or greater, or some areas you can have 2-story. But in a case like this, by having, let's say it's a 100 lot plat, I could easily see where there could be a portion of that would be set aside. I really liked your ideas and what you and I had worked on a while back with the senior living, of clustering
Right.
4 homes together and creating sort of a small community.
Yeah, I mean, you can incorporate that very easily into this. It's just another home, but then you have senior living or assisted living, or actually we want to do independent living.
Mm-hmm.
But you have independent living right there in that same community, and nobody would know any different.
Yeah,
Be
right.
really,
And what I liked about
I don't think you'd have to worry about zoning with that, because those are
yeah, in that particular case, I think you're right that because those were single family, they had the limited
right.
number of bedrooms and bathrooms. But what was cool about it is by creating, if you have 2 lots back to back with two other lots, it creates sort of a quad
Absolutely.
where that center space can then be the community
Right.
park or what
And
recreation.
you really don't, I mean, we talked about it at length, but you really don't increase the cars or anything else, because a lot of those people aren't driving
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah,
So, and if you
exactly.
even if you just figured that out and you had some parking somewhere, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be on that site. You could have a separate parking area.
Right, right. Just on a little bit of a different topic, when you are working with investors that maybe they're looking to team up with you, or you have a project that you're looking to bring additional investors in, what can you give for advice to listeners who are maybe they have a great project, they really numbers all work out, they're ready to get it funded. If you were to say maybe 1 or 2 things that really kind of stick out, or the lessons you've learned or things you suggest, you come from the perspective of being from the way I see it, all the way from sort of passive by being involved pretty closely with some of this, all the way to completely passive in some of the areas, because well, we know that because you've invested in with us in totally passive deals. And so do you have any sort of advice that you might give to a listener who has the super deal and they really want to get it funded? What would you say to them?
Wow. Um, I think that the first thing is to make sure you think the numbers work, but I think you need to probably get another set of eyes to make sure the numbers really work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when you first start doing deals, you have rose-colored glasses on.
Yeah.
I think you kind of forget to look at all the downside and look at all the potential problems. And
Mm-hmm.
they will be there whether you look or not. You just want to try and mitigate them as early as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my second deal I had to foreclose on. And I mean, that was like the scariest thing ever, but it's not that hard, it's
Yeah.
just a matter of doing it. So now I've done that. So every time I do a deal, I learned tremendous amounts. And so you got to keep your eyes open. But if you have a deal and you're trying to fund it, I think you have a percentage, you have some numbers that you're willing to give the investors.
Mm-hmm.
And the investors' game is to get as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to find out what you're comfortable with, run the deal your way, and say, this is what I have.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm offering. And if they like that deal, then they'll take it. If they don't like it, just don't act like you need their money. You just say, that's okay. I have this out to several other people. And when they sit there with their money in the bank for another year, making 1%, they're going to say, well, that 8% didn't sound so, it's not so bad right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
stay after them, stay friendly with them, but just say, here's the deal. I have this deal. But I use the example of a train station.
Mm-hmm.
And the train is coming. And there's a train at 8, there's a train at 9, there's a train at 10. You have a ticket. You can get on any one of those trains that you want to. If you don't like the first train, then wait an hour and there'll be another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as an investor, you can say, if I don't really like this deal, and the same on the guys with the money. If the deal doesn't just really hit you, don't put your money in it. Wait for the next one, because there's a lot of them. You might think there isn't, but there's a lot of deals. And the Tom and I talked about it earlier, is that, I turn away 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, that's very good. Very good. So I heard you saying, get another set of eyes on it. And I like the idea of finding somebody that will punch holes in it. Find somebody that will really find those issues, because as I see it, we want to find every single potential risk, and we want to be able to find a way to mitigate those risks. If we don't feel comfortable that we found them, and we don't feel comfortable that they have been mitigated to
Right.
a level of satisfaction, then the deal should just not be done. And so
Right.
I'm sure nobody likes to have their project scrutinized, but I'd much rather, if I'm in that position, I'd much rather have it scrutinized by somebody that I know and trust,
Right.
than be able to control those. Not only will it possibly save me from doing a deal that could have gone bad, but it'll also be a lot easier for me than if I'm going to another investor to be able to show them, these were the risks. This is what we're doing to mitigate these risks.
Right.
And so then it really shows the bigger picture, the bigger map.
My partner in one of my syndications he's an ex-banker. And he just drills me, which I hate it, but it's I'm glad he does it, because he has to he takes it out to the investors.
Right.
I find the deal, I create the structure, I sell him on the structure. If it passes his muster, then he takes it out.
Yeah.
That's on one deal, one project. And the other projects, they're all mine, but you better believe that I'm learning from him, going, drilling down through my proposals to him. He says, well, I need some pictures, and can you get, God, I got to drive all the way back to get pictures.
Yeah.
So I've now, given in, and I have about a 6-page, I call a circular, that I've done. And basically it's what we're talking about right now about those 6 lots. It's the whole story of how we found them. So when an investor reads it, he says, okay, this is how he came across these deals. They understand it. The same thing when I talk to an investor about a borrower. I have to be able to tell them that this, like, the borrower is my best buddy. I gotta know how many kids he has, where he went to high school. I gotta let him know that I know this guy.
Sure.
So when I talk to my borrowers, it's an extensive talk. I go, I said, listen to me. If you have money and I'm going to you to try and have you invest in my deal, I need to tell them everything about you, good or bad.
Yep. Transparency.
Bankruptcy, that's okay. What I want to know is, what did you do about that? How did you get over that?
So true.
It's not the worst thing to be foreclosed on. We had an issue. Okay, how do we solve it? We fixed it. Okay, that's what they want to know. Don't hide anything from them.
Yeah.
So as an investor, you need to really feel comfortable with the borrower, even though you have somebody in the middle, the lender in the middle. As a borrower, if you're trying to get money, you need to be able to give up all the data, to be very upfront. Nobody likes surprises coming from your borrowers.
Yep. Complete transparency. Right. One of the things that you mentioned, the idea of you go to your banker friend and he pokes holes in it. It's one of those things that's never any fun to go through. But it's not only that deal that's made stronger because of that, it's every deal going forward. Sure. One of the things that I've always pushed with the mentoring that I've done is to create a list. And from day one, the day you start in business, in real estate, whatever business, but especially in real estate, because that's what we're talking about here, is to start a list of any potential risks, anything that could go wrong on any project, and create that list, always build on it every time. Like, for instance, let's say you're reading about a project, or a friend has a project and something went wrong or something happened, jotting that down, because that'll trigger when we're doing our next deal. We're going to be able to go through and look at that checklist, and a lot of the items probably won't apply, but the ones where it does apply, it's extremely valuable. And so, we've got a list of, I always say it's over 700 items. I think it's quite a bit more than that, but it's a huge list, a punch list that we go through and check everything off. If it doesn't check off, we got to figure out what the issue is, figure out why it's an issue, and then mitigate that. And
you won't remember them. You'll remember, like, oh yeah, 4 deals ago I did this. But when you're looking at a deal, for me, I'm a list maker. So, I have to go down and do that. because there's no way you're going to remember, especially at Tom and my age, you're going to remember everything
Right.
about the deal 4 years ago. That what went wrong with that deal? Who was that? What was that guy's name? I can't remember that guy's name.
Yeah.
But if it went bad, you'll remember it.
Some of them are really easy to remember, unfortunately.
Yeah, too easy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, and I'm a learner. I enjoy learning part of it. So coming out of medicine and going into real estate is totally something I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
But it's been really exciting. So anybody that's listening or something, don't shy away from it, but you got to roll up your sleeves and get in there. It's not going to come easy.
Yeah. One last question. If you had to pick one resource or one thing that you would recommend, whether it's a book or something that you would recommend to a listener, or just maybe like one piece of takeaway that you might recommend, is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, yes. And actually, I was never a reader. I was always playing at football or baseball. I was always active and stuff. And since I retired from medicine, that I realized that there are a lot of assets that I don't know anything about. Mm-hmm. And so I embarked on I bought 3 or 4 books on several different assets, syndications, and I got them. They're all stacked up right here that I've been I'm reading, and I write notes and stuff from. So, you'll take an asset that you're interested in and learn everything you can about it. Buy 3 or 4 books on syndication, let's say, or owner will carry, or I'm really interested in note space, so I've been reading and learning about notes and buying paper. I have a couple properties that I own free and clear that I am going to create notes on. So you learn about notes. That's different than what Tom and I are talking about. It's a totally different thing. So probably the thing that hit me over the head the hardest, I got hit many times, but the hardest was, and when I tell you this, it's not going to sink in, I guarantee you. You're going to have to think about it. But the asset doesn't matter. It doesn't. When the light bulb goes off, you're going to go, "Oh, the asset doesn't matter." It's really that. It's how you finance that asset. It's the structure of the finance that does it. I'm looking at buying let's call it a low-tech business, because I think I can remodel the place it's in and double the volume of the business, and then turn around and run it for a year or two. It's not me running it, but somebody else run it, and we'll double the value of that business. It has nothing to do with private lending. It's just that buying this asset and repositioning the asset. It's and then there's notes, and then we can list a whole bunch of different things. So my thing is that find something that you don't know anything about, and buy 2 or 3 books, and just sit down and plow through them, and you all of a sudden become, not an expert, but you become much more versed on that asset class.
Right.
So Tom and I had a long talk about independent living, because that's what their physical therapists do. They work with the elderly, and they work in SNFs, so I have an insight on the needs and stuff for independent living facilities. And in 2008, I came up with the idea of putting 4 houses together and doing that. I have the drawings. I had it all worked out. But at the time, I was busy in my practice, and how am I going to do all this? It was like great ideas, and I pulled out the old paperwork. So you know what, this formula can still work. So
absolutely, yeah, great. Well, there's a lot of opportunities out there. It's just about making sure that what we're investing in, what we're doing, is done safely. I always push collaboration, transparency, all of that. It makes everything work so much better when everybody's collaborating, working together, true alignment, going from the place of abundance rather than scarcity. So
there's a lot of opportunities to put money, a lot of things to invest. So I know Tom's very open with his deals, and so I think if you can latch on to somebody that's willing to give you some, I don't want to say advice, but to give you some insight on what problems they've had, leverage other people.
Absolutely.
Learn from their mistakes. I have no problem telling you about all the mistakes I've made. And I've learned from every one of them, and it's making me better.
Yeah, great. Cool. And if any of the listeners or viewers would like to get a hold of you, is there a way that they might do that?
Sure. It's just my name, Lee Brownell at me.com.
Okay, Lee Brownell at me.com.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Lee. Really appreciate all the valuable information you gave us, and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Tom.